And Jesus says, we don't know the hour or day when he's coming. We just know that he's coming for sure. And in times like this, we need leaders. When times grow dim, we need leaders. I mean, like even right now, and I'm again not, I don't, there is some wood I could knock on, but I don't want to like blow my back out going down there right now. But like, I don't want to jinx this again, but I mean, if this room caught on fire right now and like the chandeliers started falling off the roof and we just had rubble and debris everywhere, naturally leaders would appear, wouldn't they? There would be some people who start, follow me, go this way, don't go there. They'd be grabbing kids, right? And I don't know necessarily who those people would be in that situation, but leaders would just naturally emerge, wouldn't they? They wouldn't have titles. They wouldn't have a position of like kid grabber or like rubble negotiator to like get us around the rubble, but just naturally leaders would show up. And that's kind of how it is. If you think about the way the world is, it's fallen apart all around us all the time. It's just a broken world. And we're in need of those people who will actually see that reality and will be in that gap and make a difference and bring more of heaven here. That's what we're in need of. And you may be saying like, that's not me. I'm not the person who, when everything starts falling apart, I'm not the person who steps into the middle of all that and goes and tries to make a difference. I'm the person who is, maybe you're the person who's kind of freezing, or you're scared, or you're like still kind of waiting to see what everyone else is going to do sometimes. And I'll tell you, we're all that person from time to time, where we're afraid to step into the middle of the fray and actually stand up and lead. And you know, it's okay. It's not your fault. That's a natural reaction for people living in a world as broken as this. We all have those moments of hesitation where we're like, are you sure, God? Are you sure you're calling me to be this person that you're describing? And in fact, you guys know when Jesus called his original disciples, they did not look like leaders at all, did they? I mean, no, it was a scrappy group of individuals. And in Matthew chapter 4 and verse 19, when Jesus goes and he originally calls his first disciples out of the boat, he says to them, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. And by the way, that's actually where the Draw Near Church and where you can derive a good solid definition of discipleship and what it actually means to be a disciple of Jesus. And before I go any further, I actually want to show you that it's so simple, even a kid can understand. So we have Victoria here. Can you define what a disciple is for me, Victoria?
The definition of a disciple is someone who follows Christ, someone who is changed by Christ, and someone who commits to the mission of Christ.
That's right. Give me some. That's right. That's exactly right. So a disciple is somebody who says, when Jesus says, follow me, they are following Jesus. A disciple is somebody who, look, he says, I will make you. Just like Victoria said, you're being changed by Jesus. You're being transformed into something else. You're becoming something. And then he says, fishers of men. That means you're on the mission of Jesus. You're committed to the mission of Jesus. That's how we define being a disciple. So if you think about it, really, Jesus is not asking them to believe something and to say, yeah, I believe that. He's asking them to become something. So when you follow Jesus, it's an active becoming. It's a lifestyle that you're being invited into. And really what this was ordinary people who were invited into something extraordinary that they could never think or imagine that it was for them. And just like you may say, I'm just an ordinary person. I'm not a leader. I'm not a kingdom leader. That's for ministers. That's for people with a title. I've never gone to Bible school, all these things. Did you think Peter went to Bible school? No, he was too busy on the boat. He had to pay the bills and everything, right? He was working. And all these disciples, Matthew was a tax collector. These were not seminarians, but they became something else. And they became what Jesus had in mind for them. They became fishers of men. And in Acts chapter 2, we saw a movement erupt from the faith of just a few, and it actually spread so far and wide that we're still here today talking about the Jesus movement that those leaders started. Following Jesus, it's like entering into a lifestyle of leadership where you go, I'm stepping into this problem and I'm taking responsibility and I'm taking ownership and I'm actually going to live into the identity that Jesus has for me, not the script that the world wrote for me. And when they did that, they became leaders. Think about this. In 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 19, it says, you are a chosen people. This wasn't just written to the preachers at the time. It says you are a chosen people. You are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. That's your identity. You can just take a hold of that. You can naturally recognize that it's for you right now. That's who you are when you're following Jesus. And you may say, it doesn't always line up, Cain. But guess what? It's that way for everybody. And he slowly synchronizes us to this calling as we just trust him more and more. And as we go deeper and deeper with him, you start to see it when you look in the mirror. You know what? I am royalty. We don't just say, you know what? I'm just a dirty sinner, and that's it. I'm just a beggar with rags. We go from being in the pit to living in the palace like Joseph. It doesn't just start with I'm a sinner and I need salvation. That's the start. But it ends with I am an agent of the light of God everywhere I live, everywhere I work, everywhere I play. That's where it's meant to land. And it's like daunting. The calling, it doesn't stop with the 12. It goes to each and every one of us. And what that means is that every single person that can hear my voice right now, and every person that's a part of the Draw Near Church is called to this. There's leaders here in this church, and you're like, that's not me, but you're going to rise up. Usually, by the way, it's the ones that say, I'm not a leader, that end up being the most effective leaders, which is funny. But if you think about it like this, do you guys want this church to grow? We want Draw Near. We want more people to get some of this, right? This has been awesome this Sunday. And then throughout, not just this Sunday, we don't just want to grow the Sunday service, right? We want to grow the lifestyle and the rhythms and the things that you guys do in your serving circles and in your small groups where you're getting into life-on-life discipleship. We want to grow that. And what it takes to do that is leaders. And when we look back on being together in this room and then we see the growth that's going to happen years down the line, we'll say, it's because I went out on a limb and I stepped into that identity. And I was able to make a difference in the life of other people. So people sitting here in this room right now will eventually be the ones that people are looking at saying, oh, I can never be like so-and-so. But they can. But they can. And it doesn't require you to have a title. You can just start. I think I can speak for Evan when I say you have permission to start leading right now. You don't have to wait for somebody to ask you to volunteer for some ministry opportunity. You can start leading right now. But when we think about this, we think leadership is based on charisma, or we think it's based on success, like when I have enough approval from people, or when I've done enough, and I can check enough boxes of good things that I've done, then that means that I'm a leader. But I'm challenging us, and this sermon really is a challenge that I'm laying down from Psalm 62, where we'll be for the majority of the morning. It's a challenge to say, what is holding us back from leadership? And there are very real challenges to stepping into leadership in the kingdom and actually filling those gaps. What are those challenges? And then how do we rise above those through the power of God? From Psalm 62. It's a framework for leaders because Psalm 62, it's about a king. It's about King David. And this guy was leading a whole nation. And he was, in a large part, not just in charge of the political leadership and just the administrative things of running the whole nation, but he was a spiritual leader too. And he carried a lot of the burden of the weight of the faithfulness or the lack of faith of Israel. And when Psalm 62 is written, it's likely that David is having a lot of challenges because he's not just having an easy go with his leadership in Psalm 62. And the truth is that when we look at what a kingdom leader really is, it's someone who's continually returning to God as their source, and they allow that to fuel their faith and then communally lead other people to be disciples everywhere they live, they work, and they play. That's how we define a leader in the kingdom. It's sourced from God. So we're going to look through Psalm chapter 62 as we find the lessons from a leader like King David. And the first is that leadership is sourced from God alone. David begins the psalm like this. He said, "Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. And truly he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken." Now, when we think about leaders, what do we think about? We think about a bunch of folks standing in a room around a bunch of charts and facts and figures and problems. When we think about leaders and the conversations that they have, we assume that it starts with a strategy, that we have to come up with a really good strategy. But that's not where David starts with his leadership. He begins by saying, "This is who my God is." And that's the beginning. He starts with God's character. He says, "God is my rock. God is my salvation. God is my fortress." Before we ever get into leading anybody, then we first need to be a really good follower. If you're feeling like you can't lead, it might be because you haven't really rooted yourself in God as your rock and your salvation, because that's the beginning point. Now, is that always the problem? No, but if you haven't done this, you can't lead. You have to first allow yourself to be led, which means I have to lay my pride down and say, I'm not my rock. I don't have to be my own salvation. I'm not my fortress. I don't have to protect myself because God's going to protect me. And that means I'm never going to be shaken. You know what? To be a leader, you need radical courage. And if you're looking in the mirror saying, this is the person that I'm depending on, then that's why you can never step out into leadership, because you're adequate in saying, and I'm adequate in saying, I will be shaken if that's who I'm depending on as myself. But if I'm depending on God, and He's the source of this whole conversation, then it changes. Because, in ministry, you'll invite people to step into leadership, and they'll say, that's not me. And by the way, that was Moses, right? That was Peter. King David was standing across from Goliath, and do you think he was like, yeah, I can take him? No, he said, God can take him. And when we get there, that's when we get the courage that we need to stand up and lead. When we wake up and we think about all the problems that we need to solve, when we think about all the worries and the concerns, all the puzzle of our life that we need to sort out, the expectations that people have of us, or we think, man, if I just perfectly word everything that I say and perfectly show up in every context, at that point I'll be ready to lead. Then we're never going to do it. Because we're always going to hold ourselves back by saying, I'm imperfect. And the reality is, we all are. We're all broken and in need of a Savior who can guard and protect our spirits as we go through this. That's why David starts this whole thing with where God is. If your leadership is going to be sourced from everybody else's approval of you, or all the accomplishments that you've done, or maybe your reputation that you have, then eventually you're going to become exhausted as you try to reach out into other people's lives. That's just the reality of it. And that's why David says, no, my whole onus, my entire identity is resting on the fact that God is my salvation. He is my fortress. So that's where we start. And before we can be the leaders that Jesus is in fact calling us all to be, we have to completely internalize this. And it's counterintuitive because we've been taught by the world, the way Gentile leadership works is you need to be the strongest in the room, you need to be the loudest in the room, you need to be the smartest in the room, you need to be the most effective in the room. And David's like, no, you just need God. That's it. And so you just need to let go. And then everything changes. Everything flips on its head. Our weakness becomes his strength. Our doubts, as they're slowly evaporated, become new faith. The faults in our character become a place where God's glory can shine the brightest, and his strength is made perfect in our weaknesses. Isn't that easier? Doesn't that allow you to lower your shoulders? Doesn't that allow you to unclench your jaw when you wake up every morning and say, my job is to introduce people to this, not me. My job is to make myself as irrelevant as possible, to get out of the way so you can see who we're really worshiping here? Doesn't that allow the freedom for you to begin to say, I could lead that way? To serve. Because the greatest among you will be your servant. The challenge is, the you that you knew has to die. So if you haven't experienced that, well, that happens in baptism. That's the first moment that it happens, is when you go, you know what? The me that was is going down into the water. And for those of you who have been baptized, you remember that feeling when you're pulled out of the water, you go, there's a new me now. There's a new you in your relationship with King Jesus, because your identity is no longer defined by your strength, your smarts, your charisma, your charm, your intelligence, your effectiveness, how cool you are. It's defined by the love of Christ that no one can ever take from you. That's pretty powerful. Though there's a cost. A lot of people in American Christianity, and I'm not trying to rag on anybody, but a lot of people make it as easy as possible to follow Jesus, right? Like too easy. And they say there's no cost. There's no cost to discipleship. But there is a cost. There's a cost of leadership, and that's where the friction comes. It would be a disservice for me to speak to you this morning and say all that I just said and then not talk about the cost. Because it's so common that people say, you know what, I'm going to step up, I'm going to get off the bench, and I'm going to start playing the game, and I'm going to start moving the needle in the kingdom. I'm going to start sharing my faith with the people where I live, work, and play, and I'm going to double down on my devotional life, and I'm going to do all this, and then there's not going to be a cost because it's all easy, breezy, beautiful cover girl after that. It's not. And so many times, I personally have went through this process of stepping out in some way, and then you just hit a wall, and you realize, man, people are really, really messy. And that's why David gets really honest. And we could be talking about Absalom's rebellion here is what historical context likely gives us, which is David's son is actually trying to overthrow his whole kingdom. And he's talking about these people that have it out for him, and he says, how long will you assault me? Would all of you throw me down this leaning wall, this tottering fence? Actually, David, who we think of as this, he's very strong. David's a very strong king, right? He's saying, I'm like a leaning wall. I'm like a tottering fence. Like I'm about to break right now. Anybody here ever feel like you're about to break every single day for like long stretches of time? Like there's seasons where, man, those 60-hour weeks start to pile up, right? Or the people that are around you, the stress is just pulling you down. And you're like, I'm like a leaning wall. I'm like a tottering fence. If the wind blows the wrong direction, I'm going to fall apart. Well, David felt that way too. And he says, surely they intend to topple me from my lofty place, and they take delight in lies. With their mouths they bless, but in their hearts they're cursing. In other words, When you go try to do the right thing and move the needle in the kingdom, and you try to bring more of heaven here, which is what it means to lead in the kingdom of God, it's going to be hard. And it's going to feel vulnerable. You're going to feel like you're, I don't know, like this. All the way out there, exposed. For all your faults, for somebody who really is unstable, which, by the way, I just want to keep it 100 with all of you this morning. Everyone, deep down, is insecure and suffering. Every person that I've ever met and had a deep relationship with and walked through life with is truly insecure and suffering. And we put on these masks to try to seem like we're not leaning and we're never tottering, but in reality, we're all vulnerable like that. A leader is just someone who's willing to take off that mask and say, that's me. And what that means is, sometimes when you go try to lead in the kingdom of God, there's going to be people, maybe people that are in your church or people that you're discipling in the world, and they're going to be like, I approve, like I give you approval, I give you validation, but then they're going to say something behind your back that's going to rub you the wrong way. It's just the way people are, right? Sometimes you're going to pour hours into somebody's life, and then they're just going to totally ghost you. It's just the nature of it. Sometimes people will see that you're trying to live out your faith in a zealous way, and it will actually indict them for their own lukewarmness, and they'll try to knock you down, to try to bring you down to their level of comfort. It's just the nature of the beast. But you know what? That's the challenge, is when you lead, you're sticking your neck out there. Remember this, 1 minute, this is the leader we're following. Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, and everybody was saying, Hosanna, it's the king, it's the Messiah, it's the Son of David. And the next minute, they were shouting, crucify. Some of the same people. It's just the nature of the beast. It's what we're being called to step into, though. And so why ride the fence? Because you can choose which discomfort you want. Do you want the pain of discipline, or do you want the pain of regret? Do you want the pain of, what if I actually did live out my faith in a bold and zealous way, the way Jesus did, and I just let it go? Or what if I go and I lead and people let me down? Which would you rather have? The pain of discipleship or the pain of regret? It's your choice. When we look at this, we don't let our leadership be fueled by approval. It's not about what people think about you. It matters what God thinks about you. And when he sees you, he sees somebody who's worthy of a crown. Somebody who is a royal priest or priestess. Someone who is made for more. Someone who one day is going to rule in heaven. But we're not going to do it from a lofty position. We're going to put our crowns at the feet of Jesus, and then we're going to hear, well done. That's the only approval you need. And so you can step into this. You can step into this because, leaders, they get knocked down, but they get back up again. You may fall down 7 times, but you rise 8 times. Leadership might feel vulnerable. But as we embrace that vulnerability, we get into the turning point of the psalm, which is in verse 5. Look at this. There's a slight difference. It sounds like David's repeating himself, but as I was reading through this, I actually discovered he's not repeating himself. He doesn't say the same exact verbiage. He says, yes, my soul. He doesn't say finds rest in God. He says, yes, my soul, find rest in God. Notice that David's actually kind of preaching to himself. He's telling himself, find rest in God, my soul. Like when we sing that song, come on, my soul, don't you get quiet now? There's a lion inside of those lungs. We're preaching to ourselves, and David's hyping himself up, and he's actually speaking to himself the words of life earlier that he referenced in the psalm, and he's saying, my soul, find rest in God right now. My hope comes from him. He is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I won't be shaken. So he just got done talking about all the ways that it can hurt to lead. And that's why he goes back again in the psalm, because this is a teaching psalm. Because I don't know about y'all, but I've had my teeth kicked in trying to step out and love somebody. I think we all have. And when you do that, it can create a pattern of, well, then I'm going to go back into myself, and I'm going to rely on myself, and I'm going to kind of cave in. I'm going to trust in myself. And then we want to power through. So we try to power through for as long as we can. But then we come to the end of ourselves, and we kind of just give up. And we kind of just lay our weapons down. Or maybe we give up for a while, but then we stand up, we go, you know what, I'm going to power through. And it just creates this vicious cycle. But that's why David brings us back here to my salvation, my honor is dependent on God. My mighty rock, my refuge. I trust in him at all times. You people, pause. Because David is able to go back and source his leadership from God, and he takes us back through it, in verse 8, he actually turns his focus. Because all this right here is about his relationship with God. It's about his trust with God. It's a trust-based relationship. But then he starts pouring it outwards in the last verse. You see that? He turns to the people he's leading, literally in this psalm, and says, trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge, our refuge. It's because he retreated back to his relationship with God that he's then able to loop in everybody that he loves and is leading. And that's the only way it's going to work for us, is that we have to keep going back to the source. And when we do go back to the source, then we can be what God is calling us to be. And I just want to be clear about leadership, because there's probably some church hurt in the house, and there may be some bad examples of what leadership looks like in the kingdom of God. And I just want to wipe those away and tell you that being a leader in the kingdom is not about controlling people. It's not about manipulating people. It's not about getting a certain emotional response from people either. It's about this: helping people trust and follow Jesus from a place of a real relationship that you have with Jesus, so they can have it too, because it's worth everything, because it's to die for. When God is our refuge, you come to the end of yourself. And you let people see it because you're okay with that vulnerability. I'm coming to the end of myself here. And then when they see what you do with that, they're going to have questions about how you're able to. And that's where we find opportunities to share our faith. But there's always the temptation that we could try to just power through or just give up totally on trying to serve. But with that temptation, so what we have to do is we have to choose another option, which is we just choose God, and we keep going back to him time and time again. But in 9 through 10, and if you got Bibles, you can pull them out since we don't have them on the slide, or if you have your phones, 9 through 10, we see this truth. The temptation is that we're going to try to bow to lesser gods. As leaders, we're going to want to compromise, and we're going to want to go back to the things that make us comfortable. But David says this: surely the lowborn are but a breath, and the highborn are but a lie. If we weighted them on a balance, then it's nothing. Together they are only a breath. And though your riches increase, do not set your hearts on them. David's talking about the people that were born in a high place and the people that were born in a lower place in society. And he's talking about riches, and he's talking about status. And in America, in our culture, we associate leadership with power, with influence, with control. And ultimately, David here, I almost said Paul because I like the New Testament so much. David here is saying those things have no weight at all. It's just a smoke and mirror show. It's all It's all a circus. Power, hierarchy, control. It's nothing. It's like a feather on the scale of the cosmos. Really, we try to think, if we have comfort, if we have convenience, if we have control, then we've made it. Like, what's in my bank account? Can I make people do what I want them to do? Is my life easy? And we think once we get to that point, now I can start leading. Now I have the right to lead. But you know what comfort and convenience and control all really are at the end of the day? They're just false gods. Those are the gods of our culture. Comfort, convenience, control. We are a McDonaldized culture. We are a thermostated culture. We can flip the radio if we don't like the song that's playing and find something we want to hear. Everything is easy. It's too easy. And everything is designed to convince you that this world was made for you and your glory, but it's not. And those gods let us down over and over again. And if we try to rely on them, then we won't be able to lead because we're going to be compromised. We leaders in the kingdom, we don't bow to lesser gods. There's only one God and one Father of lights. In Jesus' way of leadership, put simply, it doesn't matter what your status is. It matters who your Savior is. Because leaders know who they follow. We know who we follow. And one of our biggest challenges in trying to step into leadership or step up into greater degrees of leadership is that we forget who our leader is. Amen. It's the biggest challenge we have is when we forget who we're following. And that's why David brings us all back around the table in 62:11 through 12. In Psalm 62:11 through 12, David ends with 3 truths about God. He said, "One thing about God has been spoken. 2 things I've heard. Power belongs to you, God. And with you, Lord, is unfailing love. And you reward everyone according to what they have done." He's telling us 3 things here. Power belongs to you. God is all-powerful, right? He's telling us that with him is unfailing love. God is perfectly loving. And then he's saying, you reward everything according to what they have done. God is justice. God is power. God is love. And God is justice. That means something incredibly freeing for us as we step into our place as leaders in the kingdom. It reminds me of something that my Uncle Danny did for me when I was just a boy. When I was going into my first day of school ever, I was absolutely terrified because I was going out on my own. And I didn't know anybody there, and I didn't know what was going to happen, if I was going to be rejected, if I was going to be hurt. Will the teachers like me? Will I be able to find friends? You know, all those things. And my Uncle Danny, he was gracious to me, and he said, you know what, I'm going to walk with you into the school on your first day, and I'm going to walk with you down the hall into your class. And that's one of the only memories I have of being that little, because it's so powerful to me that when I was looking up and I was walking through the hall, my Uncle Danny was there holding my hand, and I looked up at him, and even though he's 5'4", he looked like a skyscraper to me up there. He was the man, like he was my hero. And I knew that as long as he was walking with me, I was going to be okay no matter what happened. And that's the relationship you have with the Lord, is that he's walking with you. Even through the darkest valley, you don't have to fear any evil. And we can step into all these things that God's calling us to do. So in summation, if you're going to be a disciple of Jesus, you're already called into leadership. You don't have to wait for permission from anybody. You don't have to wait for a title or a position. You can already, in all the places where you live, where you work, and where you play, help people around you to trust and follow Jesus. You can, as you follow him, you will be changed to become like him, and you will be able to step into the mission of God and see purpose in your life like you've never had before, burgeoning. People that you know and love that you never would have expected, the scales will fall from their eyes one day because of your faith. This church will never look the same because of the decision you made today that I'm going to step into this calling. And your family will never look the same. The place where you work will never look the same. And it'll be because, not because of you, but because you sourced your whole calling from the King of Heaven. You embraced the vulnerability of leadership and the cost. You kept going back over and over and over again, no matter how hard it got, to the one who brought you to the dance. And you never forgot who you were following the whole time. It's time. It's time to go ahead and step into that calling that you know you've had in your heart all this time. It's time to lay everything aside and just run after it. So in this moment of worship that we're about to share, and as we leave and go into all the places where we live, where we work, and where we play, I invite you to be asking God, how can I bring heaven here?
Hey, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single sermon. If you feel called to give to Draw Near, click the link below, and we would love to see you at Draw Near any Sunday where lives are changing through real relationships, one person at a time.